how to pick a ripe watermelon. I've learned quite a bit about picking watermelon. I have 3 different methods that work well for me, and I use all 3 when I go to pick a melon, kind of a combination to make sure I get a ripe one. So we'll talk about those. First is a thump check. That's the first thing I do if I walk up to a good sized melon in the field. You can thump the bottom of the melon. They say to check it on the field spot. I thump anywhere on the melon generally, but the field spot might work well. I'm looking for a deep, hollow thump. Usually that would indicate ripeness in this case. If you have a high-pitched sound, those are going to be considered unripe, and I would recommend going out to your garden and just practicing on them. Get one that you know is unripe, see what it sounds like. You might have to cut one open to make sure you have a ripe one and remember what that one sounded like. I had to do quite a bit of practice before I was able to have a reliable thump check in the field. My second tip would be to check the field spot. We can see there at right on the very bottom of that melon, a nice yellow field spot there. This is going to be where the watermelon rests on the ground, so you have to carefully flip them over to check the field spot. Generally looking for an off-white to yellow color. On the Sweet Gem watermelon, they were a solid dark green rind, and they always had a dark yellow field spot for me. The yellow dolls have a lighter colored rind, and so kind of a creamy off-white color, and those were ripe. So whether you're looking for yellow or more of a creamy off-white color might depend on the color of the melon itself. White or pale green field spot, regardless of the size of that field spot, if it's not quite that off-white or yellow color, that might need a little bit longer to ripen. This is probably my favorite one to check, maybe the most reliable, I would say. I like to check the tendril closest to where the watermelon joins the main stem. So you have the peduncle, that's the stem coming off the watermelon, and it runs up to the main stem, and there will be a curly tendril. You want to find the one closest to where your watermelon joins the stem, and it needs to be completely dried and brown before you pick the melon. I have a circle there to show. There's the tendril on that yellow doll watermelon, and then here's an example of one on a Sweet Gem that is not quite ripe yet. It's starting to brown, but I would go ahead and give that melon a little bit longer. For harvesting your melon, I recommend cutting the stem and leaving 2 inches. You can cut that stem off later, but in the field, I find that to be best just to cut it with a pair of snippers. You can store watermelons for 1 week at room temperature. You could store for 2 to 3 weeks at 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and they like a fairly high relative humidity as well. If you get much below 50 degrees for a long period, you can start to see chilling injury with the watermelon. All right, I'll talk about cantaloupe real quick as well. Just a few points here. Cantaloupe are a little bit easier because they do have a significant color change. You're going to be looking for yellowed skin for most varieties, which is quite a bit different than the solid green color on an immature cantaloupe. You want to look for musky smell. It should smell like a good ripe cantaloupe that you've just cut open. You can smell the melon out in the field before cutting it, and it should have a pretty strong smell even out in the garden or in the field. Another good one, and this is probably, once again, my most reliable method for seeing if a cantaloupe is ripe, see if the stem separates easily with just a little bit of pressure. You shouldn't have to twist or pull that stem off. It should naturally separate easily from the plant if the cantaloupe is ripe, and it should leave a small bowl-shaped depression there. You can also smell where that stem has come off of the plant. That's a good place to smell and see if you have that good cantaloupe smell coming out of the fruit. For cantaloupe harvest, you can remove the stem on them. I usually don't clip them because you need to see if it's separating. So if it separates easily, you shouldn't have to clip it. And then you can store cantaloupe in the fridge for up to 2 weeks. They're not quite as picky maybe on the chilling injury. All right, that is all I've got on how to pick a ripe melon. There's my contact information if you would like to reach out.